I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Oconee County Planning Commission. It is Monday, October the 18th, 2021. Dave, can you lead us in the invocation, please?
Yes, sir. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask that you please watch over this committee and the planning staff and guide us to wise and safety-conscious decisions in support of the public. We also ask that you watch over the county law enforcement and first responders and other county employees as they perform their duties to ensure that they return home safe to their families after every shift. And we ask that you please watch over the county and state leaders as they work together to make the county and state a better place to live each day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Alex, could you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The approval of the minutes. I have never seen such detailed minutes.
It's a lot of
I
minutes.
should ask for everybody to raise their hands who went through them. I won't do that. But it looked like a small version of War and Peace. My thanks to Ms. Zimmerman for giving us all that detail. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. It passes. Public comment for non-agenda items. There's nobody signed up, but is there? I don't see anybody else out there other than you, Tony. So we will pass on that. Commission member comments. I have a couple to make here. A couple meetings ago, Howard came before us from the Building Codes Department and asked for some help with tiny homes. That was really put to, that's been finalized. What was decided by senior management was that an ordinance wasn't required. But what they were going to do was make it more or less a brochure and put it on the website. So there'd be two ways that they would have access to it. The good thing about not making it an ordinance is if something changes, they can very quickly go in there and revise it so that it will be a document that is really helpful to the public. So in any case, I would say that that's been completed. Can you bring up, please, that GPAT, Greenville, Pickens County Area Traffic Study for us, please, Vivian? This is two counties, Greenville and Pickens County, have gotten together and they're working on certain corridors that have a lot of traffic. And as you can look at the map there, it stops obviously right there at our county line. And I just want to ask the open question of why the county is not involved in this. As you know, the Planning Economic Development Group has asked us to address curb cuts and auxiliary turn lanes, and it seems like this would be a very good source of information for that. I know we have ACOG, but if we have two people working on traffic in these particular areas, it certainly would be helpful. I went to the Walhalla Greenway meeting. Somebody else wants to talk about it. Gary is in a minute here. I don't have anything else. Gary, you?
Sure. You inspired me to go and take a look at the plan that was offered for public review on last Thursday, the 14th. And Walhalla has unveiled phase one of a $5.7 million downtown greenway. And so this first phase, as far as I understand it, goes somewhere from Coffee Street all the way back to downtown area on South Broad. And based on what I saw, there's lots of drawings showing plantings and sidewalks and things like that. I did ask the gentleman who's over the project, happens to be the same gentleman that's working with Fair Play Community, Blake Sanders, I can't remember how to pronounce it, but anyway, architect that is working on this project, has been working for some time, basically. I don't know how many years it's been, but hasn't been real quick to be able to get to this point. And it probably, be a year before it's actually put in. That's just my estimate, because they've got to go through all the bidding process and that kind of thing before they can do it. But this was the first time that it was made public, and they had a bunch of drawings out. They had people that came in and visited during the day between 4 and 6, so it was just a couple hours. And when I went, it wasn't real busy. You could get to talk to somebody as long as you wanted to, basically. So it was good. I don't know what else to tell you other than this is one phase of a multi-phase project. This phase has a $500,000 federal grant, and the matching amount that Walhalla is putting up is over $600,000. And so, it is a joint effort. And I think the question becomes, well, why are they, pursuing this? And, it has to do with community development, of course, but also bringing people to the downtown area. So once all the phases are completed, it'll be over 3 miles down South Broad, cross over Main Street, and up North Broad, or however you want to. It's going to be a closed circle, if you will, or a closed triangle, probably be a better way of saying it. But anybody got any questions? I'm not sure I can answer them, but
Anybody else got any?
I was excited to see that an investment like this is going in. And planning for the future, of course, is a good idea for us to know how this will continue to progress.
We'll have just curious question. Is this just aesthetic things they're doing, or is this actually going to help improve traffic flow? Because I think the stuff they've done already, which really looks great on Main Street, has just made traffic horrendous. So did they mention traffic, or is this all just aesthetic?
My understanding is this doesn't address traffic.
Really?
No. And it doesn't address Main Street, which you mentioned.
Right.
It's South Broad and North Broad are the two areas.
Yeah.
I think there may have been some concern in the community for this phase one. I asked a question of whether or not any private property was involved, and the answer was no. It's all apparently government property through that section there. I don't know exactly. Has to do with easements, has to do with the entities that are occupying the property, and so.
Well, North and South Broad have huge right-of-ways. Both those streets do, so they got a lot to work with.
If you're interested in particulars, I'm sure you can get more information. Not sure if there's online information yet, but the drawings were the easiest thing to comprehend when you see what they're proposing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? David?
I would like to comment on that. Me and Gary probably do have a few opposing views on that subject. I as well went to that walk-in. The drawings, very nice. My concern, of course, is a municipality that has trash trucks that need repair. They've got bathrooms in Sertoma Field that are almost uninhabitable. They've got water supply issues. They've got infrastructure issues. And we're spending $600,000 to buy one, get one free, a Greenway project. And that Greenway ends down, I think, the first phase, right there at the feed and seed store. But nobody was able to tell me that the feed and seed store, which is one of Walhalla's best businesses, is gonna get taken over by that project. So I've got concerns with it, but I'm sure the Walhalla upcoming municipal elections will decide the direction of that project. That's all I have.
Anybody else got anything? Okay. Staff? Vivian, you got anything to add?
You had asked me to get a map from Lisa about the addresses.
Yes, yeah, will you
So
show
that
us
is on your
that?
screen and is quite interesting.
These are for the 3/4, the number of new addresses that have been issued. Just to give you an update where the population is coming in from, and you can see in certain areas much more dense, residential primarily, obviously, and you can see where it's moving around. And I think that's a good visual presentation of it. Anybody got any comments about it? Okay,
I found
anything
it
else?
Quite interesting. No, sir.
Can you zone that in? Can I make a comment real quick?
Sure.
The Troy Valley area, can you make that, Vivian, a little bigger and see if it's
The which area?
Troy Valley? Be right off 11. So, okay, so it don't have individual streets. Go
No,
back
I
north a
actually
little
went
bit.
down that far into it, no.
Okay, all right, go up a little more. It'd be kind of over there, you think so, David? Okay.
I think this would be
That's Highway
Falcons
11.
Lair?
Troy Valley's over here.
Yeah, okay,
It's to the west of 11.
okay. I might have missed my boat there,
Couple
Mr.
little-
Chairman, but
couple-
I'm gonna go back to the member comments is, I've been stonewalled on something I brought up a few weeks ago about a convenience center in that community, or for that community, and I was told that the population growth wasn't there. And, but I kind of see that it is, so just to have that on record, that I'm supporting those constituents and those, in that community for that convenience center.
That is,
So,
that's Falcons Lair area, right?
well, Falcons Lair would use that, you know.
Is that this one right here?
Correct, yeah,
That's what I thought.
thank you.
Okay. Any other comments about that? You got anything else, Vivian?
No, sir.
All right, let's move on to the development standards. We have one person, Tony, want to come forward? Please state your name when you get up to the podium, will you please?
I'm Tony Adams. I live in District 4. I spoke with your commission at the last meeting on development standards. And this time I said it appeared this proposed ordinance was more unnecessary government intrusion on private property rights. It appears our county has functioned pretty well up to the date without this. We need to ask, do we not already have enough codes, ordinances, and zoning to adequately address this issue? There is another issue that may be the most important, and that is how much cost would this ordinance add to any project impacted by it? This issue may have been addressed last year when this first came up, I don't really know. It should be fairly easy to come up with percent of additional cost for a project by the size of the project and the perimeter that would be affected. Say we have a $500,000 project on a 2-acre parcel. And it shouldn't be too hard to look at what would be required in this ordinance and put a cost figure, at least a ballpark, close ballpark figure. To me, that may be the most important issue here. We have all kind of environmental impact studies done, and there needs to be a financial impact study done also. There's a very real possibility that an ordinance like this would make a project cost prohibitive and prevent it from happening. And I have to ask if this is possibly the backdoor motive of this ordinance. Control it or kill it. I'll close by saying there's an old truism that states if you try hard enough, you can rationalize anything. And I have to say, I heard what I considered attempts at this at the last meeting. All I ask you to do is consider all aspects of this proposed ordinance and ask yourselves, is it really necessary? We should all be painfully aware today that we have more government than we need at all levels, national, state, and local. We don't need to be looking for new areas to add already heavy and sometimes harmful burden of government. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have an email that has been submitted, and I'll go ahead and read it. Everybody should have a copy of it. I'll go ahead and read it.
No, I just got that email, so they don't have a copy of it.
Oh, okay. Let me read it to you. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. I had a fall Friday and broke my patella. I am on doctor's orders to keep it stabilized and to stay put until it can be repaired. I will be watching on YouTube. I want to emphasize the Agriculture Advisory Board supports Ordinance 2021-19 establishing development standards related to lighting, screening, and buffering on new non-residential multifamily mixed-use development. We took the opportunity to discuss these standards at our last meeting. We made suggestions to strengthen and clarify the ordinance and Document B. We appreciate your willingness to consider our suggestions. Lighting. Light standards in this ordinance address artificial light and light pollution. When followed, these standards would lessen the negative effects of lighting in new developments on existing agriculture, forest land, and residential. Mitigating artificial light and light pollution by making appropriate lighting choices, shielding lights properly, and using lighting only where it is needed improves the health of the ecosystem, protects the view of the night sky, and saves resources. These standards need to be clear and concise in this ordinance. Screening and buffering. Screening and buffering standards in this ordinance address the critical spaces between and the effects new development has on neighboring agriculture, forest, and residential properties. Screening and buffering have profound benefits to both the existing property and the new development. They improve the environmental health, aesthetics, and enjoyment of both. Typically, higher property values are realized when both unique properties. Screening requirements, for the most part, are sufficiently described in the existing document. The AAB did suggest a few changes in landscape recommendations. Buffering requirements outlined are minimal when compared to neighboring and other counties in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. We support these requirements as a minimum. The approval of these standards meets several of the goals outlined in the agriculture elements of the Oconee County Comprehensive Plan, and the ordinance exempts agriculture and forestry uses and activities from these standards as defined by the South Carolina Right to Farm Act. The Agriculture Advisory Board supports these proposed development standards and will advise County Council to approve Ordinance 2021-19. Thank you for your consideration, Debbie Sewell, Agriculture Advisory Board. All right. Let me give you a brief background of where this draft or version of the came from. At the last meeting, the public hearing, if you want to call it a practice public hearing to give you a little bit of humor, there were several comments made from the public and from members about development standards. The minutes captured these comments very well. To make another effort to enlist the Planning Commission members' comments, an email was sent to all members asking for your comments about the development standards. This was a survey, if you will. This was a great chance to make your thoughts in direction of where you thought the development standards should be refined, improved, or revised. Only one member responded, and that was Gary. So I can be somewhat cynical and say that I guess everyone was okay with the original draft. I attended the Ag Advisory meeting then and heard their comments. Based on the public hearing comments, Gary's comments, and the Ag Committee's comments, Vivian, Gary, and I got together and created a draft or version B of the original ordinance. It's now coming before you tonight for your comments. It's a draft or a starting point for further discussion. If we can get a consensus of opinion among the members, my thoughts are that at the next public hearing, we can offer this to the public to consider as an alternative to the original development standards. Now, I have a few more comments to make before we start. We never voted on creating a version B, so shortly I'll make a motion to do that. I want to ask again that everybody be recognized to speak so that we don't interrupt each other, and there was a little bit of that going on at the last minute. it's very difficult to do the minutes. And Ms. Zimmerman had really quite a time trying to work and put down the minimum minutes in detail. So let's try to get recognized before you speak. What I want to do tonight is discuss one section at a time. In other words, we'll go through number 1, then go to number 2. If you feel something needs to be revised, please suggest and be specific wording that you think is needed. The revisions will not be final and may change after the public hearing on the 15th. I'm going to relax the public comment rules, but we have Tony here, and if he wants to comment before each section, please feel free to do that, Tony. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at development standards, but I want to make a motion here to get started. I move that the Planning Commission create a draft ordinance B of the development standards based on the October 4th public hearings, and that this version B be further amended after the November 15th public hearing.
Second.
Is there a discussion? You want me to read it again?
Explain option B. What is, are you saying that we already have an ordinance in place and therefore we're looking at taking A out and sliding B in?
Both. We're going to have both. We'll have the original, and then we will have a version B, which is what we will suggest to the public as an alternative
To this existing,
to the existing ordinance. What you have in front of you is,
Just clarification is the existing proposed ordinance. It's not an ordinance yet.
yeah,
that's what I was wondering is we have a draft and we're having an option B draft that we're going to choose one or the other, or are we saying we need to revise the original draft?
from what I heard, what we heard, the public was not really receptive to the original draft. So I thought it would be best with staff to get together and create an alternative. This was in the minutes when David was here. He was talking about submitting to the county council to a version B and the original.
Could I just trying to clarify, and maybe this makes some sense, is the county council sent it back to us. Now, in the meantime, we're looking at it, we're saying, we're getting feedback from the public as well, but we're saying, this thing can be improved. So instead of trying to go through a lot with trying to just amend A, if you want to call the original A, then go to B, and then you've got a clean slate. It's a whole lot less, hard to follow. So,
And we're going to submit both back to council?
We are, from what I understand from David, we have to send back the original version. And this can be an attachment to the summary. We have to include a summary. And that summary will have the public's comments, it'll have a few quotes, it'll have our action that we take and what we vote on. And this could be something that we could add as an attachment to the summary and say, this is what we think it should really be.
That this is our new recommendation?
This is our
based
new
on-
recommendation.
Okay, and we're going to call it A and B, and we're going to describe B as that.
That's
This is
right.
a new recommendation.
well, I don't think we're calling the original A. I was using that as a way of us dealing with it. But when it goes back to, with the summary and everything, I don't think it'll be referred to as A, because it never has been referred to as A before.
So we just have option and option B.
The original and option B.
Okay. I think the wording's weird, but the name of it's weird, but
Well,
it is, as long as we describe
do
what
you
that
have
is
a
to
better
council.
name for it?
I don't know that I do, no. This is what we believe is better. I don't know what the name would be for that, but as long as that's the name, I guess, I'm good with that.
Frankie?
Your motion is to change things after we have public hearing?
Yes.
That is not a good idea, because the public sees this version, and then we're gonna change it, and then send it on to council without the public seeing what we've changed.
There'll be a public hearing.
On this version, that when we change it up to the public hearing. But we shouldn't change anything after public hearing, because that's taken, the public sees this, say this is what we've done up till the public hearing. And then we have our public hearing on this particular paper, and then we're gonna change it or add to it. That's not the proper way to do things. You do all your changes before public hearing, have your public hearing, and then that's your document.
I don't think so. Gary?
Okay, I'd just like to respond. My understanding is that the purpose for a public hearing is to gather information to make changes. Now, the original is not gonna be changed, from what I understand. David Root says not to change that. I mean, we can make, in our summary, references to comments that were made by the public to make changes. But I can see where, and I don't know if there's a misunderstanding, but I think what we're trying to do is get Plan B in front of the public for their comment for the hearing that's gonna take place. Does that make sense, Frank?
If we have a public hearing and present Plan B is what we're wanting to send to council, then that shouldn't be changed after the hearing, because that's what the public is they're speaking based on that or that paper. And then we're gonna take, after we hear them, we're gonna change everything. What if we change it to where it's something they didn't want? What if after we hear their comment, we decide we want lighting to go 90 degrees, but the public said in the paper, it said we couldn't do that, we wasn't gonna do that? I mean, your public hearing, when you have a public hearing, it's based on the paper that the public sees before the public hearing. They're speaking about that. You can't change it afterwards, or you shouldn't. You can do what you want to, but I will vote against it.
Can I ask a question?
Just a minute, Tony. Just a minute. David?
So what I heard in the last meeting was, it was more of a process issue. We had the original version, version A, and it actually went through a public hearing. Is that correct? But it didn't go through a public hearing with most of us. And so it went to the county council, and instead of voting on it, they sent it back to us because they saw process issues with it. Okay, so the question becomes, I think what David Rich suggested that we do was, that one goes back to the county council unchanged, but then we go through process issues with this new version. We develop it, we have a public hearing, we go through the whole process, and then we send that one back to the county council, and they have two to pick from. Well, they're not gonna vote for the first one. We already know that. So why send that one back to them? Why not just send them the one that we're gonna develop in this public hearing, go through the complete process, the proper process, and do it that way?
Because David said that our charge was to return the original document, and with it a summary, and we can attach what we feel should be perhaps some revision or changes. In other words, a revision B. Now, let me try to address this. When you have a public hearing, you have two phases. The public comes up and says what they think it should be, or their comments. And then we close that phase, and then we get into the second phase, where we try to take what the public has said, and then we address that in the draft ordinance, or version B, if you will, at this point. And we make whatever changes. And then we draft a summary letter. We send the original back because we've been charged to do that. We have a summary letter, and we can attach it to it, an amendment, we can call it version B, and send that back to the county council. This is the way I understand it.
But after we change it, should we not let the public look at it and come back and have comment on our changes that we made before we send it to council?
No, it goes back in the summary letter, and then the county council has 3 readings of it and a public hearing. That's my understanding of how it works, and
Can I say one
Gary?
other thing? I feel comfortable with the strategy that we're using, and here's the main reason. I think that there's room for improvement, if you want to call it document A or original. Document B is going to be better. And if it's better, then it's going to be better for Oconee County as far as enforcement and, you know, those kind of things if it's voted in. To Frankie's concern, I feel comfortable because when we send this back, the county council can decide to have a public hearing if they want to move forward with this, and they can have a first, second, and third reading. That gives the public a chance to say what they don't like about it. And for example, someone could come to our hearing and say that they didn't like something. And then we decide that we don't really want to take their advice. We decide to do something different. Well, they can go to the county council and voice that same concern that they had when they talked to us about it. Whether or not the county council wants to take their advice or not, that would be up to them.
Alex?
So I think there were 2 options that I think Mr. Root gave us. There was the one that David mentioned where it was a separate, a whole separate process. And then I think what you're talking about was we send the original document with a kind of a piggyback of recommendations. Is that kind of what we're looking at now, is the original document, these are the recommended changes, and then it goes into county council? Is that?
Let me read the minutes here. Let me read
Okay.
one part of it. I got in here in the minutes.
What page are you?
Well, I call it page 4, and at the top of it, it says owners, period, and then it says Mr. Nix agreed with Mr. Johnson's statement. I'm down at the bottom of that page. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
You with me, David? You guys down there, you with me?
I'm catching up.
At the top of the page, it says owners and then period, and then Mr. Nix agreed. Everybody with me? I'm down at the bottom of the page. It's about 8 lines up from the bottom. The easiest way to keep things flowing is to put the discussion of the ordinance on the agenda of the intervening planning commission meeting prior to the next public hearing. The discussion can be used to develop a proposed revision, essentially a version B. The public hearing scheduled for November 15th would still be on the current draft, but the public could also see what the commission is considering in version B. After the second public hearing, the commission can decide to state in their recommendation to council that version B is really what is preferred. And if you go turn the page there, let me read at the bottom. Then council can adopt those amendments. I turn the page and I'm down under Roman numeral 4, about halfway through the paragraph. As part of that report and recommendation could be exhibit or version B. So I think we're on pretty firm ground of saying we can have a version B and we can attach it to the summary. And when we have the next public hearing, hopefully we've given the right number of days for it, we can say this is what we are considering. So you, the public, give us comments. They give us comments on that, and then when that phase of the hearing is terminated, then we get into our phase of the hearing, and we talk about it after what we've heard the public says, and then we can make any revisions or amendments or changes that we need to. And then this summary letter will have the original going back with the summary, and attached to the summary could be version B for their option. They'll have 3 hearings on it, 3 readings of it, and then a public hearing, another public hearing.
Mr. Root clearly defined it as option B, so I have no reason not to call it option B. And if that was his recommendation, I have no reason to
So
suggest otherwise.
the motion is still on the floor. We had it seconded. I'll read it again. I move that the Planning Commission create a draft version B of the development standards based on the October 4 public hearing, and that this version B be further amended after the November 15th public hearing. Is anybody else want to?
I just believe the public has a right to see what our most recent discussions are about. So I think that we ought to make these changes and get them on something out there to the public so that they can at least see what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
So, yep.
Well, then let's call for a vote. All those in favor of supporting this amendment, just raise one hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, let me see. Let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all opposed? 2 opposed. Okay, the motion carries 5-2. Okay, what I want to do is just deal with section 1. And that's in front of you. Now, areas that are in yellow are after Vivian and Gary and I got together, and after talking with or listening to the Agriculture Advisory Committee, those are what the revisions or amendments were. The first paragraph or sentence there, it just more or less further refined it. On the right screen, you can see what it was originally there. So let's have some comments about that, if any are needed. Anybody? Pat?
I'd like for us to make sure that the ordinance is clarify and clearly define what the rest of it means. So if you guys think this is, for the general layman to read this, for a residential person to read this and know, okay, I know what I'm gonna read when I read the rest of it. So does that first paragraph clearly explain what this ordinance does?
Well, look at the original over on the right side, look at what was suggested on the left side, and see if that doesn't help it any.
Does the word subdivision need to be added?
Let's get into that.
I would say subdivision is a legal term that is anytime property is divided, it is legally called a subdivision. And I don't think that that's what your intent of the word subdivision is. So I don't know that it does.
Does multifamily constitute subdivision? Or is that just an apartment building?
If you take and section off a 2-foot section of your property and give it to your neighbor, that is a subdivision by law.
If I could be recognized.
Gary?
I just wanted to say, I think the word residential covers what people typically think of a subdivision. It's a residential area. That may not be the way you interpret it, but that's what I was interpreting it as.
Well, when I talk to my constituents, their term for more than one house is a subdivision. So, and our agricultural properties are getting developed, in a layman's terms, that's a subdivision. So that's why I was asking for clarity. I don't know that just adding the word subdivision is going to create any confusion. I think it would create clarity.
It's not being used anywhere else in the document. Wait a second. It may be referred to when it's explaining something else, but it's not putting specific restrictions or requirements on an area that you might determine as a subdivision.
Right. So we just leave a lot of gray area, though.
Well, I'm just telling you, I think this does the best job of covering subdivision without having to say the word subdivision. Because it says existing residential. And that's why I think about subdivision. Mike, you? feel-
I would say new
Wait,
development.
wait a minute, let's get recognized, because it's hard for Laura to take these things. Frankie, you had your hand up, go ahead.
I got a question for Vivian. Would it hurt to add the word subdivision in this in this first sentence?
Yes, because it is a little, like Mr. Johnson was saying, you can subdivide just one lot and it's a subdivision, you are subdividing, so yeah, it is too, I'm trying to find the actual definition actually in our ordinance for subdivision, so if you just give me a second.
This is gonna come down to just a legal term.
Go ahead, Mike.
The biggest thing here is if you said new development, subdivision would fall under that heading. If you said existing residential, subdivision would fall within that description as well, in my opinion. But subdivision is a term, a legal term.
Let me add this thought too. The Right to Farm Act. If I come next to you, Pat, and I build a 10-acre or 10-lot subdivision next to you, I need to know, hey, this guy's over here farming, and whatever he does, he can continue to do. And I need to know that if I move in next to a farm, things can happen. There can be activity, there can be unpleasant odors coming, there can be things going on at night or whatever. And I'm moving in next to that guy, and the thought is, you guys keep on farming, and I need to know that. If I don't know that, that's my tough luck if I don't find that out. Because somebody that is raising chickens and they clean out those chicken houses, it can get a bit ripe. Or if they're raising certain animals or whatever, it can get a bit ripe. So I think the thought is subdivisions should be left out. It's going to be, I don't know, Mike, I'm gonna let you comment.
Again,
on that.
subdivision is a legal term, and it's described even in our stuff as it's the division of a parcel of land into two or more parcels of land. Pieces of land, parcels of land, anything that you're gonna take and turn around and sell is a subdivision of property. And you go to an attorney and he's gonna go, what are you looking at subdividing? Well, I've got a foot here that I wanna give to the neighbor because it's really my driveway. That's a subdivision of land. And so it's therefore a subdivision. And it doesn't mean what we in layman's terms think of as subdivision. We think of something with an entrance and homes, but that's not what a subdivision of property is.
What about you as a realtor? You go out and you sell property, or you sell something for a property for somebody to build a house, and he's next to Pat. Pat is actively farming. You obviously tell him, look, you're moving in next door to a guy that's actively farming. And you've got to realize that there's certain activities that are going to go on next to you that you might not like.
So you're asking really multiple layers of questions. If we're talking about this first sentence, as a realtor, the word development is the word I'm looking for. Because to a realtor, that means subdivision or development, improvement of property in some form or fashion.
I got a comment, Mr. Chair.
Can you put the screen back where you were before? Put the two versions there. So what are we saying? Do you think that the original is a better sentence or the one that is suggested, the one that has yellow in it?
Highlighted is a much better sentence.
You think the highlighted one is?
Oh, yeah, I think it's much better, sir. But what about multi-unit instead of subdivision?
That's kind of like multifamily to me, but I'm not the real estate expert.
Well, can I, me and Mr. Johnson can I ask Mr. Johnson a question?
Sure.
You and I had a discussion a while back about a situation when we were talking about zoning. where a farmer or a large property owner lost out to a subdivision because of inadequate information. Does that cover this, or?
This is covered in this statement from a real estate perspective. I'm not an attorney, but when you talk about that would be considered a new development of residential property. You would envision what you're talking about by reading that statement. A new development of residential property is, it can be 2 homes or 10 homes or whatever. To start talking about multifamily or multi-unit, now you're adding an element of numbers that don't really exist. It doesn't matter if it's 2 homes or 10 homes or 100 homes. It's any given number. So when we start talking about multi-units, now you're putting a number to something that's covered explicitly here in new development residential is new improvement of land for residential use. So it's covered in there. Subdivision, as you're thinking it, is covered under that sentence.
And development is further, excuse me.
Wait, yeah, let me get, David had his hand up before you did.
Sorry.
Okay, so first paragraph, the last phrase, the following standards shall be applicable to all new developments indicated herein. Should we add new there?
We can sure add it if everybody thinks it'll help. We
It's
can
not
sure add it.
applicable to non-new developments, right? It's only applicable to new developments.
Where are we talking about?
The last.
Last sentence, the
following
following
standards
standards shall be applicable to all, he wants to add the word new developments indicated herein.
It's applicable to the new development as it pertains to its impact on the existing properties adjacent to it. Just don't want us to leave that word out.
Let's try to answer David's question here. Are you saying existing or new? What are you
Well, I
saying?
mean, we say it says the purpose of these standards is to encourage and maintain a harmonious living and business environment between the new development and existing residential, multifamily, agricultural, forestry uses. The following standards shall be applicable to all new developments indicated herein. It's not applicable to existing developments or existing properties.
You're right.
I think you're correct.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then that leads to my next question is, how do we define, and I'm sure Mike could probably answer this, new developments? Is that, so if I go and make some kind of improvement on my property, is it now considered a new development? If I add an offensive light on my property, which I've lived on for my commercial property, which I've owned for many years, is it now considered a new development, or is it, what constitutes new?
Here it is, there's a definition on your screen,
For development.
development.
Any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate, including but not limited to new homes, building structures, dredging, filling, grading, paving, or excavation operations. So adding a light would not be development. Adding a buffer, adding other items. If they don't meet these criteria for new homes, building structures, dredging, filling, grading, paving, or excavation. It's a lot. That's a lot of stuff.
Can you slide that back? Is everybody comfortable with adding the word new in between all and developments? I'm assuming,
I'm not comfortable with it, but that's okay, you know. We talked about that one time when we were trying to.
okay, we're gonna go ahead and, when we get down to the bottom of this, section 1, we'll make a motion that we tentatively accept this or whatever. We'll work something out. Let's add the word new in there. Is that okay with everybody?
Do we need to vote to make that change?
I was gonna wait until we got down to the bottom here.
It's gonna get confusing when we start
Think
doing this
so?
stuff, but.
Okay.
Okay, the reason,
ahead,
excuse me,
Gary.
can I be recognized? The reason why we talked about putting new in, this is my recollection of a discussion that I had when we were talking about this, is if you put new developments in there, it kind of, there's other things in the document that are agreements between others besides the new development. So I think this saying that the standard shall be applicable to all developments pulls in people that aren't new, because sometimes they have requirements too. Such as, hey, you don't have to build a berm for me, or I don't need this screening. So that's why we decided at the time not to put it in. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
How many people want to put in new in between all and developments?
I retract my statement, and I'll tell you why. Because I think I agree with Gary. A development is a new, you don't have to say new. You don't even have to say it, you don't even have to say it in the paragraph, the first paragraph where it says new development. When you say development, you're implying that it's a new entity. So,
Okay, you want to retract it then?
well, instead of adding new at the end, we should just delete new prior to development and just refer to developments as the new thing that we're talking about. Because development, you just showed me the legal definition of a development. That's a new entity on a property that you're creating.
So the proposed first sentence as it's written,
I was gonna say, do we really need, if we take out new, should it be between development and existing residential, and then finish the sentence? Do we need "the" in there? It seems kind of, it's not necessarily the one development, it is just development in general.
Okay, let's see if I understand where we are here.
It's not real
We're now
important.
looking at the yellow part up there, and we're thinking about taking out the new or just new.
I think
taking out
new.
"the" was what he was saying.
Yeah, so it should read either between new development and existing residential, or between development and existing residential.
How about taking out both of those words? No? Help us out here.
I think new
I think the
clarifies it a
first
little bit
sentence is
there.
well written, just as it stands. I'm not an attorney, but I think it's very clear that we are trying to create harmonious living. That when somebody comes in with a new idea, that their filter is, are we creating harmonious living by creating this new, when we create this new element?
Okay.
I
Let's go
agree.
ahead. Yes, Gary?
I think the way it's written is the way we should keep it.
I think we've kind of come around to the circle. All right. How many people are in favor of leaving that new sentence the way it's proposed with that yellow highlighted area? How many people? Let's just raise a hand here. Let's just leave it. That's 1, 2, 3.
I don't
Okay.
like "the" in there,
Oh.
but that's not that important. It just sounds weird.
Let's raise a hand again. All right, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's leave it the way it is then, and let's go down to applicability. Nothing was changed there in that first paragraph from the original document. And nothing was changed in the second paragraph either. Definitions were added. The screening and the buffer definitions were pulled from the definitions that we have in ordinances. Lighting definition was, we didn't have one, so we came up with that. Anybody got any suggestions or comments? David?
I'd like to make a motion that we delete the paragraph, "The buffer and screening requirements may be waived or modified." I think that's gonna create what I would call a good old boy system between groups of owners, property owners, and zoning appeals board. They're gonna make decisions ad hoc. I don't feel good about that sentence. I didn't last meeting, and I don't now.
And
Either it's a rule or it's not.
Does anybody else have that concern?
I'll second that motion.
Well, it wasn't a,
I thought we were under definitions.
well, we are. I went to second paragraph, and he's backed up to the second paragraph.
Oh, pardon me, I wasn't following.
Let me read what Mr. Root said. It's in the minutes. And I want to go back to that. I'm on page, all right. It starts up at the top, written, and a lot of time was taken to consider the possibilities. I'm about halfway down. And I'm going to read from it what Mr. Root said. Mr. Nix restated that he did not believe that was not consistent in how the system is set up. Mr. Root explained the item 1, paragraph 2, establishes a rule that allows a new pathway for a special exception to be considered. Generally, the Board of Zoning Appeals has jurisdiction, quasi-judicial jurisdiction over 3 types of hearing: appeal, a staff decision, special exception, and a variance. So within this new rule, if adopted by council, it would allow a new avenue if parties, adjacent landowners, come to an agreement that they do not want to have the rule binding upon them, could take their decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special exception. That's from the county attorney.
So, I'd like to have the floor, Mr. Chairman, for a minute.
Yes,
Sir? So how would this rule be enforced theoretically? It would be enforced by the 2 property owners either agreeing in the first place or not agreeing. If they don't agree, then it would be pointed out to the county, and the county would have to pursue the enforcement. Otherwise, if the 2 property owners never have an issue, it never goes anywhere. It just happens. So, first of all, that's my point. And then second of all, if you continue reading, Mr. Root added that this is how he interpreted the ruling. He believes it works in the jurisdiction of zoning appeals. However, he acknowledged that it was not ironclad for future landowners and changes in use. Those circumstances could be difficult, but we go back to how the property owners who have requested a special exception would manage it if there were changes. So if the property owners agree in the first place, why would they have to come up here and do it? Why not? Why not just leave it alone? Otherwise, if they disagree, then you got a rule. But if they if they do agree, then it never has to go to the county.
well, they could, go ahead, Mike.
That actually is not quite correct, because again, we're talking about something new. So if I'm developing something and I'm doing something new, I'm going to her and saying, I want to build this and do this, and she's telling me I can't do it. Not my neighbor. It's her telling me I can't get started until I follow these guidelines. And so this is a way that the 2 neighbors can get together and go, look, I'm building an apartment complex. It's right next to a daycare. And the apartment complex that I'm building, we've talked to the neighbor. We want to do sidewalks and everything so that the kids can come right over next door and have a safe place to walk, etc. We'd like to waive all this. But as the developer, I've gone to the county and said, this is what I would like to do. Now, we've agreed to it, myself and the neighbor, but it looks like there has to be this additional element because I might put it in writing, the neighbor might put it in writing, and the county might accept that. But this says that it would go through zoning appeals, and that way it becomes public record. Now, it may not need to go through public record that way. A letter to each might be fine. But it still needs to be in there that the 2 property owners agree, because I'm about to take my proposal to the county and the county is going to deny me until I show them that the neighbor's okay with it.
Frankie?
Can someone explain to me what the Board of Zoning Appeals has authority over buffers and screenings when they were formed to handle zoning appeals? Buffering has nothing to do with zoning. That's not a zoning classification. That's not changing the use of the land. Screening has nothing to do with zoning. Why does it have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals when they, in my opinion, don't have jurisdiction over buffers and screens?
If I may, It's a special exception hearing, just like a group development has to go to a special exception hearing, just like a cell tower has to go to a special exception hearing. These are ordinances that state that it has to go to a special exception hearing. If someone applies for a cell tower, I have to deny them because it has to go to the special exception hearing first.
Okay, what if the owners agree to this thing and then they sell the property and the new property owner don't agree with the crap?
And that's where you would get that legal document from the Board of Zoning Appeals saying, this is what we did, they agreed to it, I'm fine here.
They agreed
Now,
to
if
it.
Now, if the new property owner purchases next to this manufacturing plant, they know it's there, just like the ag did. It's not like it's gonna be the new property owner of the, manufacturing plant is going to say, oh, no, there's a residence over there, I don't wanna look at it.
Who would you go to get it in public records for history?
It could be turned into, planning, the document saying that the two people agree. I don't
Public
feel that
doesn't
it
have
should
access
be-
to her files, though. How would it go into public record?
It would have to be recorded at the deeds office.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't feel the Board of Zoning Appeals, we're adding more stuff on that particular board that really doesn't have, and again, this is my opinion, doesn't have the authority over buffers and screening requirements when they should be strictly worried about the zoning changes. If I want to do from residential to agriculture, or from agriculture to residential or whatever, the name zoning appeals states, I mean, you'd think that that's what they have to handle and uses thereof, not buffers and screens.
Mr. Chairman.
Mike,
Is there an instrument that the two parties can use that can be recorded in public record without going through a special exceptions hearing?
I
If
would
you're
imagine
agreeable as the,
I would imagine a legal document that is recorded with
just
the
a
county.
legal agreement that's recorded, and if somebody said, hey, I've got this new concept and I've got this legal agreement, do you give your blessing at that point because we would have adhered to this requirement?
I have to go with the ordinance says. Whatever
So
the
we could
ordinance
simply
says,
leave that.
I read, and that's my Bible, that's my law.
So we could say by legal, some instrument then, that buffer and screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent property owners by the agreement, by written documented agreement or something like that, legally documented agreement. Leave zoning out.
Okay, I like that better.
I just feel that the zoning appeals board has better things to do than, squabbling, two people squabbling against buffers for buffers and screening, and that could be settled in another way, and that has nothing to do with zoning, in my opinion.
So we can change the deal that says owners by written documented agreement?
help me out here. What are you gonna change, or what are you suggesting that we change?
Buffer and screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent property owners by written documented agreement,
Period.
period.
How many people think that is better?
Can I ask one thing?
Jim,
Um,
Alex?
Would it be better to do one or the other, as opposed to, right now it says owners by agreement and pursuant to a special exception? Would it make more sense or give the option to go through Board of Zoning, or leave it completely out?
No, because now you're assuming that one party is opposed to this process, and now you're
Okay.
turning somebody else into
I
the
got you.
judge of something that's in opposition.
That makes sense.
So you're suggesting the buffering and screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent property owners by written agreement?
Written
Period.
documented agreement.
Written documented agreement.
So basically, what I would need as part of my records is a recorded document uploaded into my system so that I'm not going to look for it. I'm not gonna
Right,
look
that
for
it-
that buffer.
So do
Did
we
it say
need to
written
add
and
that in there?
recorded? Written and recorded agreement?
Written and recorded, yeah. Documented, recorded is a better word.
Written and recorded.
A recorded
about-
written
what
agreement,
about
or written and
words
recorded
submitted?
agreement?
Let's try to come up with the words here. Can you help us out and do a little?
Is it written and recorded, or is it a recorded written agreement?
Either one.
I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay, recorded written agreement then.
Mr. Chair,
Just a minute, Gary, give me a minute here. I'm trying to figure out what we're coming up with.
me too.
And if I may,
Yes.
Mr. Root is the best to come up with that exact language.
Well, we can give him a rough summary, but he's the
Good
one that's gonna pass judgment on this. Hang on just a minute, Gary. Vivian, do you have down what the suggested agreement is? And I mean, we're gonna raise our hands to see. Have you written it down?
No, I haven't, I'm still trying.
Okay, keep trying. Gary, go ahead.
Okay, I think we need to include something about where the document is submitted. So it could be something like, the buffer, owners by written documented agreement, submitted to planning department for record, for public record.
It would have to go to the deeds office, and I would have to get a recorded copy.
My comment is that we're not asking them where to submit it.
That's what we put recorded in. Well, sorry.
It doesn't
Recorded
matter
telling them to-
if it can be misinterpreted, or a lawyer can get someone out of it because it's not clear. I mean,
I don't think our other ordinances say how you apply for a building permit, though. I think it's just that you apply for a building permit, but doesn't say go to this address and do this and go to this address and do this. I think that,
that's not what I'm just saying where we should ask people, it would be clear for people to understand where they submit this document. It's one thing to have a written document, the other thing is where is it to be submitted?
it's submitted through the portal that they submitted the other 97 documents that they had to do in order to get their new idea approved.
It's not clear to me.
But again, when you're doing the other 97 approvals to
problem?
get your thing submitted, those aren't told where you do it either. You just, once you start the process, they're gonna tell you, hey, go to this website and submit everything through the portal that's
Okay.
necessary.
Well, and use of the word recorded generally means that you're submitting it through a legal process to the court records.
Either
Right.
registered.
It's like a deed or anything else.
Have you got it written out, Vivian?
I'm sorry?
Do you have it written out?
So recorded written agreement,
All right, read it to me.
The buffer and screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent property owners through a written recorded document agreement. Do I have that right?
works for me.
Now, let me ask you this. How many people agree that this is what we should submit, or that we should revise it this way? How many people? Just raise one hand. Jeepers, that's unanimous. Gad, zooks, that's almost as good as adjourning. Do you have that? I
I'm
have it.
trying to type it in and it's not letting me for some reason, so I keep missing it.
Okay, I have it in my notes, Vivian, so I will send it to you. Now, of course, the final filter on this is gonna be David Root, but we'll go ahead and say that we think this is a good exception, or a good change, revision. Definitions. Are we okay with screening and buffering and what development means, since they come out of our previous ordinances?
I did have a couple of notes under screening, and I hate to keep talking about this, so it talks about obscure. Our objective is to, in part, to separate or delineate mixed uses. In other words, a gas station, a brand-new gas station next to an existing residential. And screening is just talking about obscuring, but screening is designed to delineate or separate that mixed use or that view or that whatever. It's not necessarily just to obscure, I thought.
Well,
But maybe I'm overreaching on it.
this is a definition that we've got for ordinances.
Oh, that is already
Yeah,
existing?
yeah, that's what
Okay.
that's what I was.
Okay, good.
And same with buffer. Those two are existing in ordinances. And I believe development is also. And see, that came out of the, go to your right side of your screen. We pulled development, we just put it right underneath buffer. Now, lighting is the one that we made up.
So let's don't go to the lighting yet. I do have one more thing.
What?
All these other definitions say lighting, screening, buffer, development means. Why do we not have development, ?
Well, we just pulled this sentence over there.
It was
If,
requested.
If you want to put a colon after development, that's fine.
If we're talking about definitions, I would take out the word means. I would just put development, any man-made change to improvement.
All right,
And I'm surprised that we say real estate, unimproved real estate, because there's no such thing as that. It's unimproved real property.
well, let's not try to change all the
If
definitions.
it's written there, that's fine, but that's not really a term.
I think we should copy what's in the ordinance.
I'm sorry?
I think we should copy what we read in the ordinance for development.
Yeah, see what it says in the ordinance?
I
Development
like
means.
consistency. I'm sorry, I'm true, I like consistency.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
change
We don't want to change the
words.
word development. I mean, change the
Okay.
meaning of it.
Go ahead and move that out. Let's just leave development the way it is, and let's go up to the definition of lighting and see if we can come to an agreement with that. No, slide it back up, if you will.
Oh, sorry.
Equipment made for illumination. Does anybody have any suggestions about that? You can look it up on Google or whatever, and you come up with something pretty much like that.
Hey, Mike.
Go ahead, Alex.
The only question I had is should it be considered some sort of permanent fixture or intended to be permanent? I think the question there is, I do remember the discussion about Christmas lights, and we don't want to tell people they can't put Christmas lights, even if it's a business. So,
So you're suggesting add permanent in front of illumination?
intended to be permanent. So, or even if there's something, temporary going on.
Or permanent, equipment made for permanent illumination?
Or,
Would that, or should we get down into the lighting number 2 and talk about things that are not permanent and are
yeah,
permanent?
it is included as permanent in the bottom part, I believe. So maybe that covers both of it.
Okay. Is everybody comfortable then with lighting equipment made for illumination? All right. Let's vote on section 1. Let's go back up to the top here and be sure that we've captured everything.
I want to add
Sure,
something in
David.
section 1 definitions. I think we should add something on objectionable light. I think we should define that. I'm looking at other ordinances that other people have, and they have definitions for objectionable direct glare source or objectionable light. Wait.
Is there a county that has defined that? Because that went in my next deal,
I
that
can read it.
objectionable lighting, I was like, wow,
I
that's.
can read you one that I found.
Here, I've got,
Objectionable direct glare source, glare resulting from excessive levels of illumination or insufficiently shielded light sources emanating from light fixtures in the field of view where the lens, lamp, or reflector is offensively visible above a height of 5 feet at a property line or a public roadway.
That's what, I remember the diagram that Adam had. I knew there was something there.
here, I have one.
Because that's the exact thing that he brought up, and it makes sense. But
I like
I
that.
could not think of it.
This is,
Exactly.
it's funny, I should run up against this too. Let me just add to what you said there, okay? it says, glare can be thought of as objectionable brightness. And this is a very good diagram. It talks about area to be lit, direct glare, light trespass, glare zone, etc. When we go down to lighting in number 2, slide it up a little bit, will you please, Vivian? You're going to see a reference to Chapter 38, Appendix A. And that's pretty extensive about lighting, and I can't remember right now if Appendix A talks about objectionable lighting, defines it. Can you bring that up by chance? I know.
I have so many things open right now.
I know.
Give me a second.
I, either we need to find it somewhere, because that's a big word, objectionable under lighting, without it being defined. I mean, because that's in any individual on the planet's opinion at that point,
It's
unless
very
we define
subjective.
it.
Okay, hang on just a minute. I've got Appendix A here in front of me.
So does everybody else, so tell me where you're going.
Okay, I'm going to lighting. I just want to see, is there a definition for it? I don't see one.
Illumination, there's lighting standards.
Mr. Chairman, while we're finding this, is there an opportunity to take a 5-minute break? I have to drink all my
Absolutely.
water here.
Absolutely. Let's see, it is a quarter past. Let's take a quick 5-minute break if everybody is okay in agreement with that. Let's come back and start at 2:0 past the hour, so 5 minutes. You okay with
For
that?
that,
Is everybody all right? Let's adjourn
You wanna
for
vote on
5
it?
minutes. Ma'am?
Want to vote on it?
Make a motion to take a 10-minute break.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
that's right.
We ready? Let's call the meeting back to order. We were talking about, Vivian, you brought up what?
This is the backup from that meeting, I believe you're, I think these are the, the things you were talking about, how Adam and his little, this is buffer, how the buffer would work. Well, maybe not, maybe I'm wrong.
Does it have lighting in there?
No, this is buffering, I'm sorry,
Okay.
my bad.
There was one about lighting though, that angled thing.
All right, let me, if y'all wanna just chat amongst yourselves, I'll find it.
All right, let's get back to where we were.
That we were talking about needing under definitions,
Under
objectionable
definitions,
lighting.
we were talking about objectionable lighting.
Can we just ask David Root to find what he believes is the best one based on other counties? For the definition, under definitions, because you were trying to ultimately get approval for section 1.
Yes,
And Mr. Nick said we need objectionable lighting as a definition.
that's right.
And we found 2 different definitions. Can we not just ask that David Root research and put in the most inclusive definition for us to review
I don't see why not.
so that we can get through section 1?
Yeah,
Is there any way that, excuse me, Mr. Chair, could I have permission to speak?
yeah, just a minute, I'm trying to write down something because my memory is not as good as it was.
I think it'd be better if we could reference something that we think we like what Mr. Nix brought to us. And then if it needs to be changed, it can be changed, but I don't think we should put this on Mr. Root to come up with a definition. We should provide a definition, and if he doesn't like it, then he can let us know.
But it's gonna have to go through, David, this whole thing. Mike?
I would disagree. I would think that we're a bunch of people up here that aren't experts in that field, that there are paid staff that went and had degrees in doing certain things with regard to urban development, and I think that that's an urban development category. I think that part of our reason for having poor ordinances is that we as laymen try to come up with something that is more legally termed as far as something like a definition, and I think that each county has put in theirs. I don't think that we have the qualifications, other than, yeah, that sounds good to me, to really define it.
Gary?
In response to that, I'd feel more comfortable to turn it over to Vivian than I would to Mr. Root.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with that.
All right, so, Alex?
I was just gonna say, could, Mr. Nix reference the one that he read earlier, so we do have a starting point.
Yeah.
Okay. Vivian, we can pick that up in the minutes, or do you want to read it again? Why don't you read it again?
I can text it.
You want to send it to her?
I can send it to her, or I can read it.
That'd be best.
She would really like that.
She would really like that.
We can just add that we need a definition for objectionable lighting under definitions and then vote to approve one or not approve one.
Okay, let's recap then where we are with one. On the first paragraph, we are comfortable with that. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
And then under applicability, we're all right with that, but we did revise the buffer and screening requirements may be waived or modified between adjacent property owners. And let's see if my notes are correct, with written and recorded document agreement, something to that effect. Is that essentially what I've got? Under definitions, lighting, screening, buffering, and development is all okay, and we're going to use as a starting point for Vivian, objectionable lighting that David has sent to her. And we're gonna let Vivian try to refine it a little bit more or research it more. Are we all on board with this? How many people, okay, well then I'll say, do we think we need to do a motion that we accept this? These comments or whatever that we've made, or can we just say we're okay with it and we'll move on to number 2? I tell you what, let's just say we're okay with it and we're moving on to number 2. Is everybody nodding their head?
Yep.
I like that.
I like that.
Okay, number 2. lighting. Now, what you have there in front of you is exactly what you had before, but it refers to Appendix A in Chapter 38. And Appendix A is fairly extensive about lighting. Can you bring that up, Vivian, or?
Hold on, I just got that from Mr. Nix, I'm just making sure that I can read it. Okay?
All right.
Go ahead, say again.
Bring up the lighting standards in Appendix A, if you will, on the right screen.
Lighting standards.
Lighting standards.
Start at this one?
Yeah, lighting standards. Rather than getting real specific, we felt that this would be a good option here, is to referring this back. After all, this is an existing ordinance about lighting standards, so why reinvent the wheel? But let's take time and read through it and see if there's anything that is, should be added or whatever. Let me know when everybody wants to scroll up.
Could you scroll up to the next number so we could see where C fits in?
No, other way.
Oh, this one?
No, up on the other one, you went down. Okay, that's C under what?
Oh, gosh.
Whoa.
It's under sign.
It's under 3.
Under 3, okay. So that'd be 3C.
Under signs, okay.
Okay. The reason I was asking for that, if you don't mind me mentioning, is if we get a little more specific, we could say Appendix A, parentheses 3, in C in parentheses, and then say lighting standards.
I think that's a good addition.
But I want to see, do you think that is pretty much covering it?
Mm-hmm.
Then what we have here is, we can revise it and say reference to Chapter 38, Appendix A, and then put in parentheses 3. And let's be sure that we got that.
C,
Well,
3C.
we'll let Vivian figure that out.
Lighting standards.
Let's let Vivian figure that out. How about that? Let's put it on Vivian.
And C has how many numbers? I see 2 on the page I'm looking at there.
Well, maybe we should take C off and just put 3.
No, because then you got parking standards and things.
Yeah. Let's task Vivian with doing that. How's that sound?
Vivian, do you know what we were asking for?
I do.
Okay.
Is everybody comfortable with what you've got here in front of you?
I think so.
All right, can we have a tacit agreement then? Everybody's nodding their head. Anybody making their head go
I
back
hate
and
to be
forth?
flying on, but I got one
Go
question.
ahead, Pat.
Is this permanent or temporary? Does it say? That might be a guilty party here not knowing, because I temporarily light up my event. It says permanent. David found it. Okay, thank you.
It says,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. I'm good, thank you. Chair.
Well, that's good. That's good. No, that we get all this, clarified. That's great.
20 feet, do industry, is that an industry standard as far as a parking lot light or lighting is 20 feet high?
That is our sign ordinance, we have sign ordinances 20 feet high for signs.
But it seems like those poles in front of parking lots of plants are higher.
No,
Let me,
We don't have anything for lighting other than this.
let me mention this. That was talked about, the height. My thought in the process was, jeepers, if Walmart or a very large company comes in and puts some kind of business there next to somebody, I'm sure that they could get a waiver on 20 feet if they wanted to go to 25. But it seems like the standard, when I was reading it on the internet, was 15 to 20 feet. And,
Parking lot lights.
yeah, that's what it was. But I just kind of feel, you know, if a large company comes in there with a large parking area and they want larger ones, I don't think that'll be a stumbling block. But I think if we leave it the same way that we've got it in the ordinance, then we're on pretty safe ground. So Vivian is tasked with trying to figure out how to go into Appendix A and figure out the numbering sequence so that it does refer exactly to the lighting portion of Appendix A. Okay?
If I may just,
Yes.
you know me, devil's advocate here. We have a height standard, a height limit in our ordinances, which is 65 feet. What if a Best Western wants to go next to a residence, and the Best Western wants their lights on the top of their 5-floor building? They can't have lights up there, they can only go 20 feet?
Do they put lights on the top of their,
That's where their
I
name
don't
is.
know. I mean, I would think they would want lighting on the top of their building, not just up to 20 feet.
I think
well, I would assume
That's a code thing.
you would go back and you would say, fine, you can have those lights up there, but they're gonna be shielded so that they're not objectionable light to the neighbor, et cetera, et cetera.
But if I'm going by Appendix A, I can only do 20 feet. It shall not exceed 20 feet.
Do you want us to put 65 in there?
I'm just making, because I work with this every day, and people just come to me with, you know, all the ins and outs of everything.
Well, do we need to
Is it me?
add-
Am I just reading too much into this?
I don't think you are, but I think we'd have to fall back on objectionable. What objectionable means, and we don't have that definition yet.
How often are we gonna have a hotel or motel be built in a residential area?
A bunch.
It's control-free, so I mean, we don't know what is going to be built there. And I'm just saying, you know, I'm just picking a motel.
It does happen, a lot.
Does the language reference to chapter 38, Appendix A in the light plan may be required? Does that strictly require us, would that strictly require us to, with that language, to adhere to that limit?
For me, doing the site plan, I would look at that and say, it shall not exceed 20 feet, so I can't go over 20 feet. This is my, again,
We don't need that sentence in there,
this is my
then.
law, this is what I go by.
Then that, we need to take that out of there altogether, because, if you have to go by, even though we say reference to, it doesn't say that we'll follow chapter 38, Appendix A, but if you have to follow this, then.
I mean, it does say it may be required by the planning director.
So that should get you out of requiring, if we come up with that incident, that should help you out, rather than you saying, well, you can't do it 20 feet. When we say may be required.
Right. May instead of shall.
That's
I think
kind of,
that's, I think there's too much room for interpretation, and again,
It is
clear.
interpretation by the planning director? Because it's up to the planning director is what you're saying.
yeah, I don't like that.
what don't you like?
I don't like the fact that you can, one entity can come in and possibly get approved based on somebody's judgment, and then another may not. Either it's a rule or it's not.
Well, you can always fall back and say, if the one that is not can say, well, look, such and such is doing the same thing that I'm asking to do.
You shouldn't have to put in that position.
Well, Gary?
Just for clarity, I mean, it's asking for a light plan may be required. A light plan may be required. You know, and the bigger the entity that's trying to come in, say a gas station or something, they're gonna have, architects that are providing light plans. So, I mean, I don't think it's gonna be any extra expense to a bigger entity. And then it gives a smaller entity, you know, a right to complain to the planning director and say, hey, I can't spend this kind of money to give you a light plan. And the planning director might say, yeah, you're right, I won't require one.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that we leave it the way it is and that let the planning director make a decision of whether or not they would require a lighting plan.
Let's hear from some other people. Alex?
Is anyone specifically required to do a light plan?
Right now, no,
No.
only in the overlay, the 85,
Okay.
whatever requires, I would say.
Anybody else? Pat?
The only situation I can think of, you need taller lights, and I'm just throwing this out there, how did this come up in the past? Is a football field or a baseball field, all our schools have lights higher than 65 feet. So how was that? Where does that come into play? I mean, they need them, they have to have them. So, did that have to be approved, or?
Haven't put it in a school yet, so I don't know.
That's just, I'm for the 25-foot one, so but they're gonna be in that section, cause I can envision in the future, we're gonna build another school somewhere. They're gonna have lights, so does the school district have to go by these codes? Or are these just residential and business? I mean, how do we put a limit on light height? Which I think we need it, but where's the exception for a baseball field? Westminster's fixing to do a big, large sports complex.
Within the city limits of
It
Westminster.
would fall under new development.
Okay.
The thing in Westminster would be within the city limits.
Let's,
So it wouldn't be anything to this. The Seneca Middle School is not.
We are trying to use a lighting code that is based on signage, not based on lighting.
I just think we need to just continue on with what we have here, because we got to have some base to go by. I think there's always gonna be interpretation. So,
is everybody comfortable with what we have? And Vivian is gonna try to redefine where in Appendix A this is? Is everybody okay with it or not?
I am kind of like Mr. Nix, that the more stuff that's left up for interpretation, there's more of the opportunity to go, well, you gave it to him, why am I being excluded?
Do you want more specificity?
I think that if it's in black and white, it says I followed the rules in black and white, I would like the permit now. As opposed to, I don't get it because your opinion is this, but you gave it to this guy because he's your neighbor and he took you to a barbecue, and you gave it to this guy because he bought you tickets to the Clemson game. I will prove it as it's written using this 3 and C, but I'm concerned about that line about the 20 feet. But I'll approve it. I'll say I'm good with it.
Alex?
Well, I was almost thinking if we go back to the purpose of this development standard is essentially not to shine lights in your neighbor's yard. And I almost wonder if we just need to remove that whole highlighted sentence and go back to the original.
Intent.
It's basically, you cannot shine lights into traffic, you cannot shine lights into your neighbors and be a nuisance. And eliminate the extra confusion that we have right now.
Gary?
Okay, I think the reason for the sentence is to require a light plan. What I've heard from Vivian, and apparently there's, you know, some people just write stuff on a napkin and say, well, here's my light plan, you know. I mean, or just explain it and not even have it in writing. Oh, I'm just gonna put up a couple of these, you know. So I think that the reason for this sentence is to allow the director to ask for a light plan.
Frankie?
Okay, I agree. If we're gonna require a light plan, it needs to be across the board. It doesn't need to be interpreted by the director going, well, you have to give me a plan, but you don't. If we're gonna have a rule, everyone should follow the rule. You know, make it across the board. If Dollar General does it, they have to do it. If the Hilton Hotel has to do a light plan, then Dollar General and all of those have to do a light plan as well. We can't pick and choose who we want to do a light plan or leave it up to someone's interpretation.
Gary?
Okay, with that in mind, we could change the word may to will. If we want to say that the light plan will be required by the plan director, I think I'm fine with that.
Are you talking about removing chapter 38, appendix A, and just say a light plan will be required?
I wasn't asking for that. I was just asking to change the word may to will.
I have a question.
Mike?
Everybody's always talking about, you know, the burden of putting cost on people. And I've heard light plan on a napkin versus light plan otherwise. A light plan can be a $25,000 expense for an engineer to write something up. What are we talking about as far as a light plan? Are we talking about that, hey, I can write something down, this is what I want to do because I want to open a vegetable stand? Or are we talking about a true engineered deal? Because now you really are putting a burden on people to say everybody has to do that.
Can I ask a question about the regulations or the ordinances? So we got chapter 38 here. And chapter 38 requires a light plan. Correct?
No, this is
Or is
actually
this-
Appendix A, which is for the overlay of 85, Fair Play 85, that section only.
So this is restricted to just I-85 and Fair Play.
That overlay section.
And we're gonna take this and try to backfit it to the whole county? No.
From my understanding, I asked David that question, and he said that we can go ahead and apply that and use that as a reference. If you don't want to do that, if you want to take the whole thing out and rewrite this, I can come up with several pages for you. We can go into what type of device we're going to measure the light with, how often it has to be certified, who the person is that's going to do it, how often they have to be certified, where you measure the light from on the ground, etc. We can do that if that's the direction you want to go in. Tell me what you want to do.
Oh, man.
Yes, Gary?
What I'd like to do is keep the sentence in there and change may to will, and do that other, Appendix A with the reference to the lighting standards. And if you read it and you think to yourself that it's being too restrictive, I think there's a lot of unrestricted stuff, because it's really doesn't say what kind of plan, doesn't say what kind of professional person has to be involved in it or anything. So I don't think it's unreasonable. And it's just saying a reference to this chapter 38. It's not saying that you have to have nothing higher than 20 feet for a light fixture. It's just saying reference to it. It's not saying it must be adhered to.
Unless you change it to will.
Yeah.
No, reference to 38, Appendix A, will be required. Okay, so you're saying, see, with that word "and," I was saying reference to Appendix A, and separate, a light plan will be required.
He's
And it's
changing.
not saying what kind of light plan. It could still be on a napkin. It's not saying, it's just saying a light plan will be required. It doesn't say what kind of light plan. I think there's a lot of flexibility in there for people. Here's the good thing about it. There's a lot of entities that come into our county and their thing is, what do you want? What are your standards? And they don't get a lot of that feedback from us. And then it's a risk thing for them, because if they do something that suits them and it doesn't suit the public, then they get a bad name right off the bat because people are complaining. They can't say, oh, the county made me do it. So in this case, I think it's helpful for development that people would at least have something to reference as to what might be required.
I think the may is better than the will, although it leaves my whole argument of up for somebody getting something and somebody else not. Doesn't solve that. It does solve it with the will, but man, that can be an expense.
Pat, you're being very silent. Want to go with will, may, nevertheless?
Move to the next agenda. No, I'm for, this has already been pretty well went over, guys. The agriculture, the committees went over it, and we got their blessings for it. We got other appendices here. I mean, there's always gonna be variations, always gonna be gray areas. We just need a base standard, and I think we have it. I think we're trying to critique it way too much. We got enough here that our commission can go by, our planning director can use as a direction to just, we will, at this rate, and that's not being legalistic about things, we'll never come up with a plan, never.
Frankie? Oh, Vivian?
Oh, I just wanted to say that we usually use the ordinance reference to may and shall, not will. It's just may and shall.
Shall is synonymous with will.
Yeah, but that's, the ordinances read shall.
Yeah, I like that better.
So if that's the word, if you're going to put any word in there, put in shall.
Okay. I think there are a few people that may have heartburn, but I think the consensus of opinion is substituting may, or shall for may.
I'd like to see a vote on that.
Well, we're all gonna stick a hand up, How many people want to substitute shall for may? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I count that right, Vivian? 4?
I can't see Alex.
Oh, I did not, no.
All right, that's 4. How many people against it? 1, 2, 3. Okay, motion carries. We're gonna go with, we're gonna substitute may and put shall in there. Now, that's the only thing that we've changed in lighting, other than Vivian is gonna go in there and sharpshoot exactly a little bit more where in appendix it is. It's coming up on 10 minutes to 7. Is there any interest in, yes, Gary?
I just thought of something that would maybe help clarify that sentence. We could, and I'm going back to reference to chapter 38, appendix A, and whatever Vivian comes up with, and then put a period, and then a new sentence that says a light plan shall be required. That way, it doesn't, the reference to chapter 38 is not then being required. It's being a reference for information, for discussion between the entity and the planning director.
That's probably a pretty good idea. That's not a bad idea. Good for you. Does anybody else think that's a pretty good idea?
I would vote for that idea.
There's some nod headings. Okay, how many people think that reference to Appendix 38 Appendix A, such and such, wherever it is, you figure it out, it is.
3-C.
We put a period after that and then just say, a light plan shall be required by the planning director or their designated representative. How many people think that is worthwhile? Raise a hand. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Jeepers, that's 7-0. Okay. That leaves us, we have gone through lighting. It is 10 minutes to 7. Is there any interest in maybe calling a halt at this point? We're almost done.
Almost done.
When we run into the time that we was talking about last time about does this have to be done by the 30-day?
No.
Okay.
This got to be done. We've got one more meeting to go through this.
I don't want to have to revisit this.
Let's move on.
Okay. Let's start with screening and buffering. The only thing that was changed, if you scroll up a little bit there, the only thing that was changed was, if you look on the right side, there was a lot of verbiage down there towards the bottom. Evergreen material has to be 4 feet, whatever, and how far apart they have to be planted and whatever. We went in and revised that. Screening requirements, we're looking at A, screening requirements. Required screening shall be in place within 180 days when a certificate of completion or certificate of occupancy, if required, is issued. The screening shall be by mutual agreement with the planning director or their designated representative. We took out a lot of the business about how many feet apart they had to be, et cetera. And we also, it talked about existing vegetation. It should be existing evergreen vegetation, otherwise leaves will fall and you won't have any kind of screening if that's what you use. And we went down to number 2, and it said, if you plant them in there 4 feet high, that within 1 year of planting, they have to be up to 6 feet high. Those were essentially the changes that were made. So let's scroll back up and let's start at the beginning. Screening and buffering. Just that introduction there. Is everybody all right? That's the same as what it was originally. Is everybody okay with that? Yes, Mike?
So the same as what it was originally, this was the one area where there was multiple objection to it at the county council level and objection to it by the public, because as it actually reads, proposed development is a defined word, or improved or unimproved, plus 25%. So you can't go 25% more than the property that you have, and it's including your unimproved section of property. What the intent was originally was the proposed improved area plus 25% more for the buffer. But the way it has been interpreted is the proposed development, and again, development is just the unimproved property, plus 25%, which you don't own. So that was the big complaint, and that needs to be fixed. It's really not proposed development, because we've got development defined. It's really proposed improved area plus 25%.
So you want to substitute development for improved area?
We should probably change it to improved area
Okay.
or some other word, because development is improved or unimproved.
Has anybody else got any?
Does that make sense?
Well, you know more about it than,
I'm just saying that was the objection at the county level is you can't have, if you don't own it, you can't add 25% more buffer to something you don't own. And this is saying that your development has already been defined as your entire property.
so has anybody got any objection to his suggestion of proposed? Say those words again.
Proposed improved area plus
Improved.
25%.
So development improved.
In other words, if you've got a 2-acre if you've got a 10-acre parcel and you develop an acre of it, then you're going to have the improved area plus 25% as a buffer.
So we're going to substitute that for development. Has anybody got any objection to that? It seems like it's better.
And there may be a better legal term, but we've already defined development as your entire property.
Vivian, you write that down?
Can we
You
look
got
at the
that?
definition of development again?
Scroll back up to the top, please, and
Any man-made change to improved or unimproved real estate? I guess change to would be the, but it's still, or the entire length of the shared.
Where did you get that from, Franklin? Development, okay, yeah, right there, development means.
Change to improved or unimproved property.
So the development, the definition of development doesn't even include the entire property that you're developing.
Well, it does say include the man-made change, the improved or unimproved, which includes improved and unimproved. So if it's unimproved, it's actually not changed.
Changes to improved or unimproved. Man-made change to. What does unimproved mean in that context anyway?
well, if this is,
Anyway, I like your suggestion.
yeah,
Yeah. I do too. I mean,
improved,
you're on.
what was the
you're right.
second? Improved.
I put improved
Write it all
area.
down.
I put improved area. I mean, really what we're trying to get to is if you've taken and cut out this for my commercial building, that there needs to be a buffer that extends 25% more, as long as I own that 25% more.
All right, then, the suggestion is taking out the word development and substituting improved area.
And then it says, or the entire length of the shared property line. So if I own 10 acres and I only improve an acre, then I only have to go 25% more. But if I am developing the entire acreage, because I have 1 acre, then the entire length of the property line, which is already covered in the next sentence, next part of the sentence. So we're just changing development to improved area.
Anybody got any problem with that? Okay, let's have a show of hands that we're gonna substitute improved area for development. Oh boy, it's unanimous again. I think everybody's getting worn down. All right. Let's turn the page or scroll up a little bit. Screening requirements.
Mr. Chairman, I've got one more on that last sentence on the top of that page.
All right, turn the page back.
No, it's page 2 there. It's
Okay.
the very top sentence. It says drive lanes. Is that the access in off of the road? Because you don't want a buffer going all the way to the edge of the road because it blocks the view of the
Oh,
road
yeah,
from
it's
a safety standpoint.
It's a safety
And
standpoint.
according to that buffer image we had a while ago, that buffer went all the way to the road frontage.
Why don't we ask David that question?
So if it's drive lanes, it may be that we want to take out, if that's what drive lanes mean, if it means driveway access, then we may want to take that part off.
You can't go on to the, supposedly to the.
Setbacks anyway.
I think what it means is the parking and the drive lanes for the parking. Because it's between commas. Do you see that?
Yeah,
Parking and drive lanes, but what is drive lanes, what is drive lanes?
The drive lanes to access the parking.
between,
Well, they
say,
certainly
you know,
is.
between developments, the drive lane between it.
So you almost need to include a setback beyond that then, right? For visual.
I was just thinking that if it was a drive lane meant driveway and driveway accessed the main road, that you couldn't have your buffer go all the way up to the main road. I just want to make sure that I understand what drive lanes is as a
The
word.
highway right of way is going, I'm sorry.
I think this is referencing to the space between, you got parking in front of you and parking behind you, and the drive lane is the part between where you go.
Gotcha.
Parking.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay,
You know,
okay,
it's
that
just
makes
like,
sense.
it's like two businesses and they share a parking.
Well, that was tough. I didn't know what that meant.
Okay. All right, screening requirements.
Parking there.
You can see what's in yellow there. Everything is staying the same. Required screening should be in place within 100 days when a certificate of completion, et cetera, et cetera. You can read it as well as I can. We felt that jeepers, it may not be the time to plant things. It could be dead summer. Plants may not be available that you want to use. And giving you 6 months to get something in is pretty reasonable. Also, nowhere in this document was there anything that said when you had to put the screening in? This was the first time that this was put in.
So what does the last sentence in the yellow mean? For other business activities, what's that? The screening shall be by mutual agreement with the planning director or their designated representative.
Well, if you don't require a certificate of occupancy or completion, let's say somebody is and I'm just pulling this out of the sky, a landscaper, and he doesn't require a certificate of occupancy, or he doesn't have a building or anything. He's just storing material on that property. So that would be a other business activity.
Okay.
That was the thought behind that. I'm not knocking landscapers or anything like that. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Of A, number A?
Yeah, A.
Yes.
Okay. Can we have kind of a little show of hands that we're all okay with that? Just a general? Oh boy, that's 7. Okay, all right. If we move on to number 1, added the word evergreen for existing, in between existing vegetation. I explained that before.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I got 5 acres of land, I got woods all over, I'm about to use an acre and put up a vegetable stand. I've cleared off my acre, I got 200 feet of woods between me and that residential house, but you're making me now plant evergreen trees when there were just woods there before? To me, that's a big expense. I mean, I got 200 feet of woods between me and the next, they're not even gonna know I just cleared an acre. And you're making me plant evergreen trees around my property now as a screening buffer. I mean, existing vegetation, existing evergreen vegetation, I think that the evergreen, I'm not a fan of adding it if I've already got screening.
but what happens if somebody doesn't have that much screening and the leaves fall off and you've got nothing?
It still has to abide by the screening requirements. So they would still have to plant something, so,
No, I don't think they would.
you know.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Could I say something?
Yes, please.
If you read down further, it says existing vegetation. So I think that takes care of what Mr. Johnson mentioned.
It just re-added the word evergreen after existing vegetation, existing evergreen vegetation.
You want to take that out?
Should be just
Well,
existing
what I
vegetation.
was trying to, excuse me.
I mean, I get the intent, it just, but what if? I mean, what if I have 5 acres and what if I'm developing an acre of it right in the middle of my property? I think that we're overburdening them.
Okay, you want to take out the word evergreen?
Well, can I ask Mr. Johnson a question?
Sure.
What if it's reworded, if you're adjacent to a property, what you're talking about, there's nothing, so if we said, if there's 25 foot of hardwoods in between you and the neighbor, would that suffice?
Yeah, I mean,
That's
if
vague,
you,
but
yeah,
you
if
see
you.
where I'm going?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the objective is, and I understand the evergreens, yes, especially if you've cut down all the trees on the property and now you have no buffer. Evergreens and I don't know how we word it, but I just want to make sure that we don't get to the point of ridiculousness of having to create a buffer where there's already a buffer.
I think in number 3, you just strike evergreen out. That's my motion.
All right. Gary,
Yeah.
did you have
Yep.
something you wanted to say? Let's keep this thing.
Oh, I was just gonna, address this number 1. If you read the whole thing, it doesn't matter whether or not evergreen vegetation is in there or not, because from what Mr. Johnson was talking about, it's covered under existing vegetation or any combination of the things that are available. It's, like wall, a fence, a berm, all those kinds of things. If you have a big hill for some reason right there, you don't have to plant anything, you know, as long as it's screening it.
So we take out evergreen out of number 1 and evergreen out of number 3?
Is everybody okay with that?
I am.
Vivian, did you write that down? Got it?
Crossing it out.
Okay, all right. Then we're all right with number 1, and we're gonna take out evergreen. Number 2. Does anybody have a problem with the plant going from 4 feet to 6 feet within 1 year of planting?
Do we have vegetation that'll do that?
Unfortunately, I've had it in my yard.
Those are weeds.
Oh, you may be right. I'm cultivating the heck out of them.
But I mean, do cypress trees, do they grow that fast in a year?
Leland cypress.
And what if it doesn't? I mean,
Yeah, what do we do?
you know,
Well, the other thing was, how are we gonna know about the 1 year? But,
Unless somebody complains.
yeah, that's it.
Second year, it creeps.
I don't know, I kind of think it's kind of reasonable. I don't, at least the guy is planting something that's 4 feet high, and if it only grows 8 inches or so, I don't think it could, I just can't imagine it being that difficult to.
I do think it would give a neighbor an opportunity to go, look, Mr. Judge, he planted this. It clearly says in the book of gardening that that plant doesn't grow above 4 feet tall, period, and yet that's what he planted. When there's a host of other things that do grow taller. I think that that's where the argument would come in. I don't think anybody could ever go to court and say, it's 5 foot 8 inches tall after
Yeah, after a year.
11 months or whatever.
Yeah. Hey, I'm kind of, anybody else got any thoughts about that? I kind of like to leave it and just see where we go from there. I mean, we've got the public that's going to come up here and talk to us about it.
I'm fine with leaving it.
Okay. Number 3, we took out the word evergreen. And if you'll scroll up, Vivian. Okay, buffer requirements. They're the same as what they had before. Are we okay with that?
I never liked them before, but what I don't like about the 25-foot one anyway is at that point, it's almost about the use rather than the distance. I mean, somebody opens a dog grooming shop and they got 2 cars that come every hour. That's not a lot of, or dry cleaners compared to, say, a honky-tonk nightclub. Those are completely different uses that would require more buffering or less buffering. Or a 24-hour gas station as opposed to a dry cleaners. There's complete different activity. Dry cleaners closes at 5 o'clock. There's not going to be a lot of headlights, things like that after 5 o'clock, whereas a 24-hour gas station's constantly going to have headlights and everything else buzzing through my living room windows.
Well, there are uses that you can put in the buffer.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Gary?
I'm bringing this up just, maybe I might tax your memory a little bit, but I had, in discussing this with you, had said I'd feel more comfortable if we just put 5 feet for, you know, and not, it doesn't matter how many acres you've got, just put 5 feet. Vivian ended up saying that there are other requirements like 5 feet on the sides and 10 feet in the back. And so that made me think, oh, well, 5 feet ain't gonna work everywhere, you know? But, I would like to see that 25 feet lower and the 15 feet lower, but, I think you made an argument for keeping it as is, and I can't remember what it was.
Well, Pat, you want to help us out with that? You want to reduce it, Pat?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, I'm talking to the agriculture guy
Yeah,
here, and I'm thinking of what the Ag Advisory Group said. And
They,
they've got, let me finish, they've got references to much, much wider buffers. And, I would kind of like to leave it the same and see what the public says when we get to the public hearing.
Agreed.
Okay? Under uses permitted in the, are we okay with that? Leave it the way it is and let's hear what the public has to say? All right, under uses permitted in the buffer, paved was added in front of sidewalks.
Why?
Well, the thought was, is that really a sidewalk or is it just a path or whatever?
What about a boardwalk?
I haven't seen a boardwalk since New Jersey. And I'm not going back there.
They've got some in Clemson.
Oh, they do?
and they're ugly.
Do you wanna take out paved?
I just was playing devil's advocate. I don't know. I mean, sidewalks seem to carry an image for people.
To me, a sidewalk, you automatically think a paved cement sidewalk or something, you know? I don't think it's.
Can we put improved, and that'll take out pathway, just a dirt path?
This isn't I mean, to me, it doesn't matter to me. I was just wondering, sidewalks could be made of, I mean, Shelton Head's got boardwalks all over the place. They're wooden as opposed
How about if we changed or paved to improved? And then we gotta figure out what improved is.
I'd rather leave paved than they come up with a new definition.
The reason I say improved is because you can put down the paved brick paving, that's not necessarily a paved sidewalk, that's,
Pavers.
pavers, yeah.
I tell you what, how about if we leave this for the public and let's see what happens?
Just let them decide, let the people decide.
All right, let's go down to exemptions. You can scroll up to that, please. Vivian. And you look at the, let me bring you over there. Uses permitted in the buffer. I'm looking at the right screen. What was deleted was DHEX approved stormwater detention areas and DHEX approved septic systems. That was removed. They've got so many requirements for it, it would be almost a page long to try to include that. So DHEC's got their requirements, and if you can work it into your buffer, then fine. But we thought that it's just kind of redundant. So it was eliminated. Now, the exemptions have stayed the same. All that you see in number 4 is the same as what is in the original document.
All right, make a motion on this thing.
What motion are you gonna make?
Somebody had one written up. I'd like to make a motion that we approve this with changes that have been discussed. Although we need to direct that objectionable lighting, we need a definition for that. So how do we make that motion?
With requested changes.
Yeah, with requested changes.
Second.
Any discussion? Now, we understand that this is gonna be presented to the public during the public hearing, and it'll be, maybe revised again. So this is just something to present to them. Okay, yes, Vivian?
Are we bringing this back next week for another look at it, let everybody think about it?
We can do that, and you and I were gonna talk about the agenda, and we can certainly bring it back because we can have a week to 2 weeks to think about it and let it gel, talk to your constituency or whatever. and bring it back. So we'll put it back on the agenda. There may be something else on the agenda too.
So are we not then voting that this be approved? Or are we voting that that we direct staff to make the appropriate changes and bring it back?
Let's make the motion that staff makes the approved suggested changes and it comes back for another
For
review
another review on an agenda.
on the agenda.
That's the motion I'll make then.
I'll second that one. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of that, raise one hand. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Do you need to raise a hand or is it all in favor?